Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Arizona Illustrated for Friday, the 24th of August, 2012. I'm Jim Ninsel, host of Political Roundtable, our weekly analysis and commentary on local, state, and national politics. Tonight on the Roundtable, we'll talk about what to expect in next week's primary election. We'll also see how the volatile issue of abortion will affect Arizona races and discuss TUSD's budget challenges. Joining me this evening is Pima County Democratic Party Chairman Jeff Rogers, Tucson Tea Party founder Trent Humphreys, and former Republican state lawmaker Peter Hirschberger. Thank you all for being here. Trent, primary election day has finally arrived. Do you think we're going to see any surprises or upsets on election night?
Well, I mean, there's the two elections that nobody knows, that nobody can call in District 1 in the county race and in the sheriff's race as well in the Republican primaries. I don't think there's anybody that can come right out and say, I can guarantee you this person's going to win. I think that people have their speculation, people have their favorites, but I think everybody will be waiting to see who wins those elections.
And Jeff, how about you? Do you think surprises, upsets?
I don't think we're going to see any big upsets. We've got three candidates running for the two House seats in both Legislative District 9 and 10. I'm not sure anybody has a leg up in either of those. Maybe Wheeler does, since he's ran before. He's an incumbent and also a member of the city council in the past. So he's probably got a little bit of a leg up there. But other than that, those races are very difficult for me to predict. I don't see any other races where there's going to be an upset. I think that in the Congressional District 1, Kirkpatrick has a huge advantage of money and name recognition. But I think that Winona Benally Baldenegro will probably do better than her money shows for that race. I think that she'll, she's going to do better than people think. But I still don't think she's, got a real shot at it just for the reasons I mentioned. So I don't see any big surprises in the Democratic Party primaries down here.
Pete, your thoughts? Anything?
I agree. I don't think there are going to be many surprises, and yet whoever wins a supervisory race in District 1 won't necessarily be a surprise. We don't know who that's going to be.
Right, that's the one that's kind of out there. We probably know that Jonathan Payton's going to prevail in the primary for the Congressional District 1 to face Ann Kirkpatrick, as you said, who's probably going to win over there. Martha McSally on the Republican side in the Congressional District 2 is probably going to win, and then Ron Barber on the Democratic side, and they'll face off against each other. Raul Grijalva is probably not in trouble, but it's these supervisor races that you talked about, Trent, that I think are the most interesting, the four-way one in particular up in District 1, where we really don't know who's ahead in that. It's a pack of candidates.
Four or five-way races are just tough to call anyway, unless there's a huge incumbent or an outstanding person that just sucks up all the oxygen. I don't think we've gotten that in any of those races.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people are saying that they've seen polls that show Allie Miller actually climbing on, building some momentum and building some steam in that race, but whether or not it's enough to put her up on top of either Vic Williams or Mike Helen remains to be seen.
And like we've talked about, I mean, the polling has to be completely, because people just don't know who's running in those races. I bet there's a huge undervote just because people don't know the difference, and if you don't know, a lot of people just leave that blank. I think you're going to see that's going to take place here too, just because people can't name who's in the office now for the most part. So for them to step up and all of a sudden have a really strong favorite, it's just not happening in those type of races. It's unfortunate, but that's just what it is.
And do you think that's partially a result of the media not covering enough of these races?
Possibly, but I mean, just those lower level races have always, kind of went by the wayside unless there's a hot button issue or there's an issue that really resonates with people. And obviously the economy's cruddy and there's the roads are bad, but those have always been the case in those areas. And I just don't see it like a case where an incumbent's ever been. When's the last time an incumbent was defeated in one of those races?
A long time, but that's a completely
Ed Moore,
open
probably
race.
in 1996, and that was an unusual circumstance where he had re-registered as an independent, and there was a three-way race there.
Figure, but I think one of the things that I look at this race for is Ann Day has served this county awfully well for an awfully long time, as her sister served this nation and this state, and I think we owe a debt of gratitude to her. And I hope that whoever emerges from that Republican Party is someone more in the tradition of Ann Day, who will work very hard even though she disagrees with the three Democrats a lot, she's somebody who was a moderate on environmental issues and worked very hard to get along with everybody and have a board of supervisors that worked. So I hope someone emerges from that race that is like that. I know our candidate is definitely, Nancy Young Wright, is definitely somebody who is a lot like Ann.
And Pete, do you have any sense of what's going up in there? That's your old stomping grounds.
Right, and it's the end of the summer. It's a primary. Who's going to go and vote? Will there be voter fatigue at this point with all the noise? We just don't know. It really will be anybody's game. I would be surprised if Allie Miller won. I think it would be Mike Helen or Vic Williams.
And we've got the other supervisor primary, which is the Ray Carroll versus Sean Collins race in District 4, which is over on the east side of Tucson. Trent, your thoughts on that one?
Well, I thought that Ray was running a really strong race up until the last couple of weeks. I think he's made some poor campaign decisions in the way he's portrayed himself in his ads and in the general discussion. That doesn't mean he's a bad person, but I think it was a mistake in the way that he did it. I heard his last ad that he cut on the way here to the studio, and that's the kind of message he should have been preaching for the last few weeks instead of engaging in fighting and knife fighting like he has been. I think you'll see is the early voting's already started. I think he's already won the race in early voting, but I'd be willing to bet that when we look at the people who go to vote on Tuesday, that his opponent will do Sean Collins will do a lot better in that area than he did in early voting, just because of the way that the race is kind of deteriorated at the very end there. I think Ray, if he had to go back and do it again, I think he would have done it differently.
And this is a situation where Sean Collins, the challenger, has not had a lot of money to get a message out, but has been pretty aggressive in some robocalling and a lot of stuff on the internet. But I'm not sure that wins a primary election, Pete.
I think it's Ray Carroll all the way. I think that was a foregone conclusion.
And
he's an awfully conservative guy, but he is a man, I think, of unquestionable integrity, and I would hate to see somebody like that lose out to what is sort of really more like a Tea Party challenge to him.
And let's look ahead a little bit to the general election. The big race in Arizona will probably be the race between Jeff Flake and Richard Carmona for the U.S. Senate, and this week, of course, the abortion controversy came up, and the Arizona Democrats were saying that Jeff Flake was somebody who co-sponsored this bill that would redefine rape that became so controversial in the last week. Jeff Flake was in town this week, and I spoke with him, and he says that he does not make differences between legitimate rape and illegitimate rape. But the Democrats are definitely trying to pick up some ground here, Trent.
Well, I want to, if we can digress a little bit, I'd like to talk about Aiken first of all.
Sure.
This upsets me not as a Republican, but as somebody who espouses a pro-life, viewpoint. I know people, I've met people that have been raped and kept the baby, and that is the joy and the glory of our position, of people like that. And for him to think he could take that away from us, for him to think that that's of no consequence, for him not to know people like that, or to have that be part of what his pro-life experience was, that makes me sick. I mean, that's somebody that adopted a pro-life position because it was politically expedient for him to do so. And it angers me that he like I say, that somebody like that would come along and say, oh, I'm a pro-life person, and not know the stories of the women who we should all look up to. The women who had the opportunity to say, no, I don't want that baby. No, that life is just not convenient, and yet made the choice to keep the baby. I mean, that's an amazing story, and every American should look up to those type of people. For him to think that situation does not exist, he just needs to quit and get out of there and give the people from Missouri somebody they can legitimately vote for.
It doesn't look like that's the direction he's going.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, there's supposedly a deadline, but I think that there's still a week or two where, if enough pressure is put on him, he would get out. And I think for the people of Missouri, they deserve to have a legitimate choice in that race. And so it would be great if he would get out.
And Jeff, this is an issue that has really probably not what Republicans want to be talking about the week of their convention.
No, certainly
and even Flake, when he was speaking at the Republican Club this week, was saying that he'd like to see the focus get back to the economy, and it's been distracted from that.
Well, I'm not surprised at anything flip-flop Flake would say. And the fact of the matter is that he was a co-sponsor to the very bill that inserted language called forcible rape into that bill. And he was a co-sponsor with Aiken and with the new vice presidential candidate, Ryan. So, what Aiken did was he mouthed the virtual position of the Republican Party. You look at the Republican Party's platform right now, and it basically says there shall be no abortion, period. Not for rape, not for incest, not for statutory rape, not for a forcible rape, whatever you want to call that. I call them, they seem all to be forcible to me, and not even for the life or health of the mother. So is what the platform of the Republican Party is right now. So, so Mr. Aiken, his biggest crime was boldly stating that when everybody else has been very careful. Or as in Flake's case, he's just changed his position again from, not supporting it in rape and incest, but now he says, okay, well, we will allow it with rape and incest. So, they realize that this extremely rigid position is offensive to 2/3 to 3/4 of Americans. And so they want to walk back from that. But that is their party platform, and that's who controls the Republican Party right now at the national level and at most state levels and even county levels. So, they're kind of embarrassingly walking back away from their platform. You've got the presidential nominee, Romney, saying, oh, that's not my position. I will support a woman's right to choose in the case of rape and incest. But just yesterday, Paul Ryan doubled down on his and said, no, that's not my position. I don't support it in rape and incest. That's it. He limits it to the life of the mother.
And Pete, what are your thoughts on this whole issue?
Well, Aiken is not an isolated incident among high-profile Republicans who have made insensitive and irresponsible statements about women and abortion. Rush Limbaugh's statements about Sandra Fluke, Bob McDonnell's proposal for the transvaginal ultrasound requirement. These are repeated irresponsible positions taken by the Republicans. The definition of changing of rape to forcible rape, where Paul Ryan, Aiken, and Jeff Flake signed on as sponsors, is another example. In Arizona, we have the example of House Bill 2800. You cannot use federal money for abortions, federal or state money in Arizona for abortions. The Arizona legislature took it one step further, and they prevented Planned Parenthood from serving access patients. So tens of thousands of women will not get health screenings, will not get contraceptives. So now, when they don't want abortion, they are going to prevent contraception, which is going to put more pressure on abortions. It's nonsense, and it's part of a pattern nationally and in Arizona of a war on women, and it's totally irresponsible.
And Trent, you want to weigh in here?
Debbie Washington Schultz is out saying the same type of things, and she's just getting beat up by the media because she, as well as these two, are misrepresenting the position. Look, there are, the pro-life, pro-choice argument will go on forever because, when it comes down to, in the end, is, what's best for our children and what's that going forward. And it's an argument that there's extremists on both sides. I mean, just years ago, you guys were arguing that we needed partial birth abortion. That's just a sick thing, and it irks me. In fact, who supported that? Our president. And if we talk about extremists in abortion, it goes both ways.
Well, I think most people, have the view that I do that the Supreme Court got it right in Roe v. Wade, and pre-viability, that it ought to be between a woman and her doctor and her pastor and her family to make these kinds of decisions. When you get to viability, then that's the law. From viability on, then abortion can be outlawed, except in the case of the life of the mother.
Now,
so I think that's a pretty reasonable middle ground for us to be at. And while some people would suggest, well, Democrats and maybe President Obama want to allow abortion all the time, no, we think Roe v. Wade got that tight line right, and it ought to remain as the law, and it still is the law of this land. So I think that's where we ought to stay, and I don't think we're ever going to get rid of this because there's a certain amount of people that say it should never occur, and there's quite a few people who say that it should occur pre-viability, and then there are narrow little issues by that very, very rare procedure that the Republicans called partial birth abortion, which was done in only very narrow circumstances late in that pre-viability period, at perhaps the 20-week period when it was absolutely necessary for some reason to engage in that procedure. And so that didn't outlaw abortion up to that point, and it outlawed one procedure.
All right. Well, obviously, this is going to be a debate that will continue, I'm sure, through the election. But let's talk about the congressional races. It seems to me the most competitive congressional race we're going to have in these parts will be the race between Jonathan Payton and Ann Kirkpatrick, assuming both of them do win their primaries next week. And last week, the NRCC announced, the National Republican Congressional Committee announced that it was going to be spending $900,000 on behalf of Jonathan Payton. The DCCC has already announced that it's spending money on Ann Kirkpatrick. You serve with both of these guys up at the legislature. Pete, what are your thoughts on how this race is going to shape up?
I think it's going to be a very close race. And I think it does get competitive with the money that Jonathan Payton will get from the National Committee because he's not shown an ability to raise money on his own. I think it will be close. And we'll see.
And Trent, your thoughts on how this one's going to go?
Again, we're in a new district. But some of these people are familiar with Ann Kirkpatrick, and she lost the last time she ran in this district. I think that if I were a Democrat, I'll put the Democrat hat on. I would have backed Winona, and I think she's a brighter star. I think she speaks more to the Democratic heart, and I don't think she's wishy-washy and is you're never going to get a statement from Ann Kirkpatrick. You're going to get a carefully worded letter that comes from one of her representatives. And I think that the people in that district, they need more than that. I think they've gotten used to that from Rick Renzi and other people that have represented them. And I think you're going to find out that as time goes on and she skips more and more town halls, she skips more and more personal meetings, that's going to wear on her. Now, if she's willing to work harder than she's ever had, she might have a chance, but I haven't seen that out of her yet, and I don't suspect we will.
Well, she's a fundraising machine. The district was 80% of the district is the same district she won in 4 years ago. She only lost by not a very large margin in what was a wave election where Democrats got destroyed all across Arizona and all across America. So I see her as being a very strong candidate, and I didn't even think that race would be competitive, and I still think it's going to be hard to make it competitive. But certainly, with the Republican National Committee weighing in with a few $100,000, that could help. But remember, this is a very rural district. You can't come in and carpet bomb a rural district with television ads like you can down here in Tucson that we've seen, and you can't. And some of that district is fed by a Phoenix market, but the Phoenix market is very expensive to advertise in the television market up there. So this is going to be a ground game. And if somebody handed me $200,000 or $300,000 in free money like the Republican Party's just handed Payton, I'd have to suggest you better use that for a ground game, because this is not going to be a contained district like Tucson can be, either one of them, where you can run carpet bomb with television ads.
Ann has been working hard and been throughout the district. She was in Oro Valley. I saw her last week. Plus, Jonathan has a big hill to climb in terms of being a carpetbagger, not being from the district, his payday loan baggage that he carries with him. I think those are all going to be difficult for him to overcome.
Jonathan Payton was a hero. He took CPS, where kids were dying, Pete. You know this. You work for CPS. Mm-hmm. Kids were dying. Jonathan Payton reformed that organization.
I saw Jonathan Payton take the lead on that and then drop it like a hot potato when there was another issue that he could get publicity on. So I don't think Jonathan Payton was about the kids. Jonathan Payton was there to get publicity for Jonathan Payton
solved that issue. He got the legislation through.
Well, I'd beg to differ. CPS has still got a myriad of problems, and they continue through to this day. So that problem hasn't been solved. But I concur with Pete. He basically moved into that district. He's never represented one soul in that district except some of the people in Oro Valley and Saddlebrook and the Marana area that were part of the old district he tried to run in. I just don't see him getting traction there, and that's one I will predict here today. Kirkpatrick wins.
So if you move 2 miles to the west, you can't know what the people in eastern Arizona are thinking. That district is so large; everybody's a carpetbagger because nobody can actually live all over that district.
Well, I think Ann Kirkpatrick represented that area for 2 years in Congress. Before that, she was a rural state legislator who represented a large portion of that district on the northern part.
We'll have to agree to disagree, but I would suspect that you're going to find a lot of surprises come Election Day.
Well, it's going to certainly be, I think, the most competitive. But there you also have the race here with Congressman Ron Barber, who's more than likely to win his primary next week, and Martha McSally, who's more than likely to win hers. The McSally campaign, Jeff, this week released a poll showing that they were trailing Ron Barber by only 5 points. That's in contrast to a poll the Barber campaign released in July that showed him up by 13 points. Either way, Barber is in the lead in both of those polls, and the Barber campaign is throwing a lot of cold water on the McSally poll.
Well, even the McSally poll shows Barber at or over 50%. Well, there you go. She's got to get every one of the undecideds if you believe that poll. They didn't release any of the crosstabs in the poll. They also didn't release anything that showed the presidential poll, for instance. Sometimes you can use that. If they poll both of them in the same batch, you can go, okay, that sounds about right. Which in some of the polls we've seen that have included Barber, there have been presidential numbers, and those numbers looked about right for Arizona. Obama wasn't winning, but it looked about right. So I don't think the margin's going to be as high as 13, but I don't think it's going to be as low as 5. I think it's probably going to be somewhere between 7 and 10, maybe more, but I think he'll win fairly handily there.
And Trent, what kind of support do you see McSally getting here locally?
Well, I mean, she didn't get the same buy-in that Jonathan Payton got. That was a signal that other people are looking at different polls. I think that you're going to probably see Martha will probably just do as well as Jesse Kelly did. I think it's really hard to have somebody be in office for 4 months and throw him out, when there haven't been any momentous, votes taking place or any character, there hasn't been any scandals or anything like that. So I think that you're going to pretty much see the same result that, and that's what I think the Republicans thought was going to happen back in the day. If he didn't beat Ron Barber last time, it was going to be hard to come and beat him in November.
Because the district has shifted and become more advantageous to Democrats, although Republicans have a very minor edge.
Yeah, I think that'll all wash out. I think you're going to get something almost similar to what you had in the last election cycle.
And Pete, you're supporting Ron Barber in this race.
Absolutely, and Ron's got
does McSally have any sort of crossover appeal?
I think not. I think Ron has crossover appeal much more than Martha would have. And he's got a strong organization that's been consistently working, and I expect will work right up to Election Day, and I think he will win rather handily.
All right. Jeff, last week we thought the jungle primary was back on the ballot, but now they've done some signature checking, and it looks like it's not going to be on the ballot.
Yeah, the proponents of it are very aggravated with the elections in Phoenix, the county recorder's office, who's found something like 37% of the signatures are not valid in the test sample. But if you look back in the past, that's not unusual for it to be a higher percentage than you see in Pima County and the rural counties. There's just something about Phoenix that the signature gatherers, and also when you use paid signature gatherers, which is what they did, you tend to have a much higher error of erroneous signatures. So, I'm not surprised, but, this group spent a lot of money, upwards to $1 million. We haven't seen their latest reports, but when legal fees and everything are shown, I think it's probably going to be $1 million they've spent, and they've wasted it. Now, I'm glad to see it lose because, as we talked last week, it has a tremendous number of flaws and is an invitation to mischief and all kinds of other problems. So I think that maybe the backers ought to let this election cycle play out and see how things go, because I think with the redistricting, you're going to, and some of the blowback to some of the craziness that went on at the state legislature, I think you're going to see quite a bit different state legislature in Phoenix come January. I think there's a chance, it's not a big chance, but a decent chance that the Democrats can get to 15-15 tie in the Senate, maybe even take the Senate. I don't think we can cut that close in the House, though.
And Pete, you thought the jungle primary idea was worth taking a look at.
It was credible, yes.
But so you're disappointed that it looks like it's not going to make the ballot?
Yes. I wanted to see it on the ballot so that we could let the people decide.
And Trent,
well, this whole thing was not an organic effort from Arizonans. This was bussed in from somewhere else, and they paid a lot of money to try to put this on our ballot. And quite frankly, I'd like to see everybody that tried to do that fail.
Yeah. And the other thing is that why not just let it play out for a couple cycles in California? We've now got some numbers and some figures from California and Washington State that we can look at and kind of say, here's what did or didn't work, and let them be the guinea pigs for a couple election cycles. Because if we change this and go to a different way of voting, it'll be hard to undo that problem. So, let's let it play out in California.
I'll point out that, again, the representatives of the parties are protecting their own turf here.
And Jeff, the Tucson Unified School District is having some town halls in an effort to try to figure out how to solve a pretty significant budget shortfall this year. They're talking about closing schools. How do you think this process is playing out?
Well, the people I talked to who have been to the town hall say it isn't panning out very well. I mean, there were people, the school board members who showed up, some left, some went back and sat in the audience, and that left the speakers to be speaking to an empty dais or something. And so far they haven't gone so well. I question what will come of it. Of course, we ought to have input from the public as to what ought to happen with TUSD. But I'm very concerned about one of the proposals that Superintendent Petticone has, and that is that he wants to close a lot of small schools and create these huge schools. And spend a lot of money building some new schools, close neighborhood schools, and couldn't we spend that money in the classroom to actually educate the kids? And wouldn't that be better spent money? What do you get out of a brand new shiny school? Maybe you get a little better internet wiring and some newer cooling heating plant or something. But is that what teaches children? No, it's teachers that teach children.
All right, and we got less than a minute left here, though, Trent. TUSD and its budget problems.
I'm right there with him. If you're going to do a town hall meeting, you need to have rules out, and it needs to be a serious endeavor. And I don't think that's what's going on here. But I mean, the other problem you're going to have is, and I'm right there. I think they should use the local schools. The more schools are local, the better off things are getting. But the problem we're going to have is that there's just not going to be as many children available for those schools. So the population of those schools is going to shrink and shrink and shrink, mainly because there's just not as many children born right now. And number two is a lot of children are leaving and going to charter schools where I think they have a better opportunity in some of the TUSD schools. And TUSD has a lot of things to clean up. And I think that if they did clean up a lot of the issues that they have, a lot of the misconceptions, or in some cases proper conceptions or misconceptions people have, they might get some of those kids back, but they're never going to have as many kids as they had 2 or 3 years ago. It's just not going to happen. So they do need to have an escape plan to wind things down. But I'm not sure building new schools should be part of that plan.
All right, and unfortunately we're going to have to leave it there because I know you know a lot about this education funding, and we didn't get to downtown. But that is all the time we have for tonight. You can learn more about what's happening in politics by visiting azpm.org/yourvote. And while you're on the website, we'd love to hear your thoughts about tonight's program, so be sure to leave us a comment. And find out the latest from AZPM by following us on Facebook and Twitter. Stay tuned next for the News Hour, and then at 8:30, tune into Arizona Week for a look at how key primary races could reshape the Arizona legislature. Next week, Arizona Illustrated will be off. Arizona Public Media will be bringing you the conventions here, but we will be back on Friday with Political Roundtable. I'm Jim Ninsel. Thanks for watching, and have a great weekend.